The 20th of August, 1947, Lüneburg, Germany. After more than 8 months on trial, 23 defendants, most of them doctors accused not only of evil Nazi medical experiments, but also involvement in deadly euthanasia programs, hear their sentences read. After the gruesome testimonies of tens of witnesses, the world finally learns the truth about the painful and often deadly medical experiments on thousands of prisoners without their permission. While 7 of the defendants are acquitted, the atrocities which the rest of them committed were so inhuman and horrendous that 9 of them received prison sentences ranging from 10 years to life imprisonment, and 7 of them are sentenced to death by hanging. After the outbreak of the Second World War, Nazi Germany started to occupy many countries across Europe. Millions of people in the Nazi-occupied territories, including Jews, Romani people, Slavs, and disabled people, were turned into slaves, and thousands of them became subjects of pseudo-medical Nazi experiments. These experiments were often conducted without anesthesia and had 3 main objectives: to ensure the survival of German military personnel, to test new drugs and treatments, and to advance racial ideology. To ensure the survival of German military personnel, the Nazi doctors at Dachau concentration camp performed high-altitude experiments in low-pressure chambers, simulating conditions at altitudes of up to 21,000 meters to determine the maximum altitude from which crews of damaged aircrafts could parachute to safety. Another medical experiment here was the so-called freezing experiment to treat hyperthermia which occurs when the body temperature drops. In this picture, the prisoner is wearing an experimental Luftwaffe garment. There were even experiments when the naked prisoners were exposed to outside temperatures of -6 degrees Celsius or 21 degrees Fahrenheit for several hours. To rewarm them, the fanatical doctors even threw them into boiling water. In all the above-mentioned experiments, the Nazi doctors wrote down every detail of the prisoner's death and after how many minutes they died. Dachau even had seawater experiments to find a method to make seawater drinkable. The inmates were given nothing to eat or drink but the seawater. After a few days, the inmates were so desperate to find any source of fresh water that they started to lick the freshly mopped floor. Dachau was also the home for new drugs and treatments for malaria. Dr. Klaus Schilling infected the inmates either by injecting infected blood directly into a vein or had them bitten by infected mosquitoes which Nazis themselves were breeding in Dachau. In order to fight the malaria, he used quinine and various synthetic drugs which had a number of side effects they wished to study. Another experiment was testing immunization compounds and serums for the prevention and treatment of contagious diseases, including malaria, typhus, or tuberculosis. At Buchenwald concentration camp, for instance, Waldemar Hoven conducted experiments regarding typhus and the tolerance of serum containing phenol. At Ravensbrück concentration camp, they conducted sulfonamide experiments. Sulfonamide was an early antibiotic. Himmler's personal physician, Karl Gebhardt, and his assistants Fritz Fischer and Hertha Oberhauser often used a hammer to break the legs of female prisoners in Ravensbrück concentration camp, then infected the open wounds with aggressive bacteria and monitored the healing with and without antibiotics. They also experimented with removing and damaging nerves, muscles, and bones in the legs to see if they would regenerate. They even attempted to transplant the limbs from one person to another, believing it could help in treating amputee soldiers. To advance their racial ideology, the Nazi regime not only legalized the involuntary sterilization of persons suffering from diseases including schizophrenia, alcohol abuse, insanity, blindness, or deafness, but also performed sterilization experiments on the inmates. At Auschwitz and Ravensbrück, they tried to develop a sterilization method which would require a minimum of time and effort and would be suitable for sterilizing millions of people. The most infamous Nazi doctor was Josef Mengele, who performed his experiments at Auschwitz concentration camp. Mengele was mainly interested in identical twins. The reason probably was that he wanted to increase the number of newborn racially desirable Aryan twins. Mengele even took part in selections of arriving prisoners because he was looking for twins to conduct medical experiments on. His subjects, mostly children, were often better fed and housed than the other prisoners, and he presented them with sweets and introduced himself as Uncle Mengele. However, The experiments which followed were incredibly brutal. They included infecting one twin with typhus or some other disease, and transfusing the blood of one twin into the other, or performing unnecessary amputations of limbs on them. He was also obsessed with heterochromia, people with eyes of two different colors. He even attempted to change or lighten the eye color and hair color of his victims, like the ones you can see in this picture here, by injecting chemicals into their eyes to make them look more Aryan. After he conducted his experiments, he killed the subjects and sent their eyes to Berlin for further study. Another of Mengele's obsession was with dwarves and people with physical disabilities. He tried to treat them with X-rays and unnecessary drugs, causing them incredible pain and often death. After the war, Karl Gebhardt and Waldemar Hoven faced justice at the Nuremberg doctors' trial, and Klaus Schilling at the Dachau trial. They were all sentenced to death by hanging. However, Josef Mengele never faced justice for his crimes. He lived as a free man in Brazil, where he died in 1979 after suffering a stroke while swimming. The fate of those submitted to these experiments was often a sad one. Most of them died during the experiments or were killed after the experiments to study the effects of the experiments after their deaths. Those who survived were often left physically and mentally disabled for the rest of their lives. At the doctor's trial, which lasted from 1946 until 1947, the defendants tried to justify their experiments, saying that these experiments had been a military necessity, and compared the victims of these experiments to collateral damage from Allied bombings. Some doctors even claimed that they had been doing the world a favor and that there was no international law regarding medical experimentation. As a result, the Nuremberg Code, a set of research ethics principles for ethical medical human experimentation, was created in order to set values that professionals can refer to in the case of any confusion or conflict. Modern scientists reject the use of results from experiments in the camps because they were involuntary, caused unnecessary pain and suffering, and often ended in death or disability. Thanks for watching the World History Channel, and don't miss our next videos. Click the subscribe button now for more interesting clips. Give us a like, and see you in the following episode.